Thank you. So the first thing I can tell you is I'm told we have 20 minutes to talk about two things that I've been working on each for about 20 years. So it's hard to do. In that regard, I'm going to start by using the first 30 seconds to tell you what I'm not going to tell you. I have a day job, and over the last couple of decades, we made the first wearable insulin pumps. We made stents. We've made prosthetic arms. We made all the devices you can see here, iBots and Segways, dialysis machines. Frankly, I don't need your help for that stuff. I have big clients that help me put that stuff all over the world. Instead, I want to talk about two things which are both in desperate need of media support, and one which will help get media connected around the world to a few billion people that right now don't have access. First few minutes, we'll talk about water. It turns out that of all the medical products I've made, in fact, of all the medical products made worldwide by the entire global pharmaceutical industry and the global medical products industry, collectively they treat 50% of all human disease. The other 50% would go away if you just gave people clean water. So about 10 years ago, I started working on a way to make clean water at a scale that's pretty disruptive. It's smaller than this podium. It's a little box that'll make 1,000 liters of clean water a day, but more importantly, it'll make it out of ocean water without osmosis membranes. It'll make it out of a latrine without chlorine. It'll make it out of water that's full of organics, inorganics, hexvalent, chrome, arsenic, like 1.5 million wells in India, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, without activated charcoal. The goal was make a box that'll make clean water the way nature does. It pulls it out of the ocean, it pulls it out of a cesspool. In those clouds where you have that pure distilled water, you don't have machinery, you don't have filters, you don't have membranes, you don't have chemicals. The trouble is, it takes 25 kilowatts of continuous power to boil water at a rate of 1,000 liters a day. I needed a machine small enough that you could scale it down to put anywhere where you need point-of-use water, any village, any clinic, any school. Big enough to make 1,000 liters a day, and it had to be 50 times as efficient as a still. It has to be able to run on less power than a handheld hairdryer. We spent 10 years figuring out how to make a very, very, very efficient distiller by recovering all of the energy, by recirculating it in a miniature vapor compression system that we built. The good news is it works. The bad news is in most of the places where people have no water, they also have not even any electricity. So we worked on another box about the same size that would turn any source of liquid or gaseous fuel into electricity. We ran 2 villages in Bangladesh for 6 months on nothing but methane gas coming off a pile of cow dung. For 6 months, we made a few kilowatts in each of 2 villages. And that was enough electricity to run the water machines and give everybody in the village enough electricity to power phones and get on the internet and access the media. These are 2 of those machines sitting outside my office in Manchester, New Hampshire. This one is the vapor compression distiller. It'll fill 50 of these containers. This is the Stirling cycle generator. We didn't have any cows around, so we cheated. It's a bottle of propane that'll run this thing for a weekend. I finally, after 10 years, had both of them working. They're both small enough to make point-of-use electricity and point-of-use water anywhere in the world. They can serve 2 billion people that have neither. The problem is, how do you get it out there? My partners for a couple of decades are the world's biggest and I think best medical products companies. They go to about 70 or 80 countries where people are rich enough that they can afford health care. There are 206 countries on this planet, and in about 100 of them, none of my clients, including the biggest medical companies in the world, Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, they don't go there. How am I going to get this stuff there? I tried going to the World Bank, the United Nations. They don't distribute products. How do you get these 2 boxes cost-effectively, efficiently to 206 countries? There's one company on this planet that goes everywhere, Coca-Cola. I went to see the chairman of the Coca-Cola company. He said, that's great, we do go to 206 countries, but I got a problem of my own. I want to make a next generation piece of fountain equipment that you can press a button and get any one of my 126 different products. And he said, Dean, you build medical equipment, you build precision metering and monitoring and control for drugs. Build us a machine that will allow us to fill it with cartridges in the base, the world's largest inkjet printer, and make every one of our beverages in real time. I told him I would do that under the condition that if it worked and I exceeded his expectation, they would help us figure out how to take our water machines everywhere in the world. We spent a few years secretly developing this machine. They launched it last year. There's 23,000 of them out there around the country now, and they're expanding very quickly as freestyle. I went back to see Muhtar. He remembered his promise. He had us build 15 machines, our water machines. We put them in 5 different schools and clinics in Ghana under the supervision of Coke in Africa. After 4 months, we produced 140,000 liters of pure water. It worked. He asked me to give videos of the actual kids in these villages as a demonstration to his board of directors, which I did a year ago. As a result of that, they partnered with us to build the machine smaller and lighter than the big boxes that you saw, that black box. The only requirement Coke said was, can you make it red? I made it red, and last summer at the Olympics, there's Muhtar Kent, the chairman of Coke, with Will.i.am and his sustainability officer. He said, Dean, I'm going to bring this to the Olympics. This is the Coke headquarters at the Olympics, and we will show the world. He also recognized that we needed more than just the water machine. He wanted electricity. We decided to build 10 by 10 by 20 shipping containers, of which there's hundreds of thousands of them around the world, into downtown in a box that gives people around the world all their basics: water, electricity. And then we went to see Qualcomm, the world's largest provider of communications capability. They own CDMA. And we went to Paul Jacobs, the chairman, and said, if Coke can do the heavy lifting and bring these boxes everywhere, and we can build a whole eco-center, Coke spelled backwards, and we can put electricity in there, and we can give Bill Gates refrigeration for his vaccines that now can be taken with clean water, you, Qualcomm, have to give us communications in every box. And Paul agreed to join. We went out, we tooled these up, and a few months ago, at the annual shareholders meeting of Coca-Cola, Muhtar Kent presented a 2-minute video to the world, his board and his shareholders, which has real video of our trials in Ghana, along with animations of what our eco-center will look like, and I'll show you that video. Well, here's Bill, and he's now joined in. This is, again, my place in New Hampshire. This is the boxes. Before we painted them red, we built about 100 of them. And here's the animation of the Eco Center with our water, our power, and our communications inside. And here's what Coke presented. So that indicated, as you saw at the end, the story continues. That was done at their shareholder meeting. Since that date, it continued. You saw boxes going to Paraguay. They're now operating. And Muhtar Kent went to South Africa and opened a real eco-center along with Condoleezza Rice, a major delegation of people from the US, from Africa. And we are in the process of building 3 more of these eco-centers, which will all have access. So your media will get to a new 2 billion people. We will have water, we'll have electricity, we'll have refrigeration. And we're putting e-health into this, and we were here in the last couple of days working at getting one of your major companies to participate in an e-health program along with my other partners. The Stirling engine is also upping in power. We have a major energy supplier in the United States that's now partnering with us, and by the end of this month, we will have built nearly 30 of these systems and deployed them. They make about 10 kilowatts, and they'll be going into each of these eco-centers as well. I would love to spend a lot more time talking about our water and power, but I have a total of 20 minutes. We've used almost half of it. And so I'm going to tell you about another thing that I think is potentially as significant and in some ways more disruptive than any single project we've worked on, because I'm trying to work on a project to create disruptors. I think the world, sadly, has two kinds of kids among its 7 billion inhabitants. The ones that do live in the desperately poor places, a few billion of them. They don't have resources. They can't fix the world. They get up every day looking for water. And then you have the kids in the rich world, in Abu Dhabi, in America, in Japan, in Europe. And the rich kids in the world seem to be obsessed with leisure time, with nonsense, with sports and entertainment, not as a pastime, but as an obsession. Well, if the rich think the world is their playground and the poor are desperate, who's going to fix it? So I decided a long time ago that we've got to get to the kids that have resources, that have potential, that have privilege, and make sure they understand responsibility that goes with that privilege. But what gets kids passionate these days in a media-driven age, you guys have been very effective. Media drives every culture where you have access. And it's given kids role models from two industries, the world of entertainment and the world of sports. But it's such a powerful model, I decided I'm going to take science and engineering and I'm going to package it up just like sports, in every way, just like sports. Kids have to go to school and spend 40 minutes once a week in math and algebra. But then every day after school, they can practice for 3 hours, bounce, 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 throw, or kicking a soccer ball. What they have to do, they don't like. What's aspirational, they do all the time. It's not surprising they get good at sports. Math, not so much. But the future of the world doesn't depend on people that can bounce a ball. It's going to depend on a generation of kids that are passionate about solving problems with the tools of math and science and engineering and innovation. And in a knowledge-based world, we've got to have more kids passionate. So I formed a not-for-profit called FIRST. It's like sports. Everybody wants to be first. I never saw kids running around cheering, I want to be second, except in the math and science that they don't even study. And I use the model, as I said, of sports. But kids will only play a sport where they see superstars. In America, they all want to play football. In most of the world, they want to play soccer because they see superstars. I needed to get in front of kids the superstars of the world of technology. So in 1991, I convinced 23 companies to adopt local schools around America. Some of the biggest companies in America, Boeing, Google. Well, 23 years ago, there was no Google, but back then, United Technologies and General Electric, and over the years, Google and the rest came in. And I said, you're going to adopt schools, and we're going to use a 6-week, very intense after-school activity that ends with a double elimination tournament, brings cheerleaders, bring the school bands. Let's have a good time. Let's celebrate. Let's show particularly women and minorities that science and engineering is accessible. It is fun. It's important. We did it. The first year, they were little kits, 10 pounds of junk. The next year, it was 20 pounds. The next year, it was 40 pounds, 10 kilos, 20 kilos. We've had 55% compound annual growth for 22 years. So we started with 23 teams in one event in 1992. Last year, we gave out kits to 29,000 schools. We had teams from 69 countries. We have 121,000 volunteer mentors, superstars of science and technology working with all these kids. We have 3,500 corporate sponsors. Since I'm not going to have a lot of time, I'm going to show you the fastest review of the growth of FIRST. By the way, it needs the world of education behind it. But it also needs industry. You need tech companies to take the time to show kids there's a world besides sports and Hollywood. And it needs government, although I've told 4 presidents of the United States since we started, 4 of them, Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43, and Obama, please don't help us. The last thing I need is turning science and engineering back into the dull, distant, difficult. But, Mr. Presidents, each of you can do your part. What I need from government is your bully pulpit. Every president in the United States, and I'm sure here, manages to entertain once a year. They bring the winners of the World Series, the Super Bowl, the Academy Awards to the White House. I've asked each president, bring our kids to the White House and tell them they deserve the same limelight, the same recognition as the superstars of other industries. And 4 presidents, no matter how different they are politically, have agreed to just bring those kids to the White House with their mentors, with their coaches, and do that. So, first, in 1992, in a high school gym in Manchester, this is the president announcing, I'll bring the winners of your competition 6 weeks from today when you finish your robots to the White House. 6 weeks later, in a high school gym, that's everybody in the world that knows what FIRST is. By the next year, we have a new president in the Rose Garden bringing our kids for their recognition. By 5 years later, in 1995, we've outgrown the ability to run our events anywhere in New Hampshire, where I live, but we have Disney, one of the greatest entertainment companies ever created, hosting us at Epcot for our championship, which by then had hundreds and hundreds of teams coming. 7 years of doubling and redoubling at Epcot brings us to 2002. And they said, Dean, we built you a 20,000-seat arena for this year's championship. If you double to 40,000 next year, not even Disney, the world's largest entertainment company, can house it. So we use them now for one of our 66 regionals that happen throughout March. But the following year, our championship went to the Houston Astrodome. By then, the robots weighed 50 kilos and could run on a field the size of a basketball court. By the next year, we moved to the home of the 1996 Olympics. By the next year, we have a new president, and he's bringing all of our winners, and we even have, for the younger kids, not Little League, but Lego League, where we have kids as small as 6, 7, 8 years old learning science, technology, engineering, software. Yes, you can chase the president around the White House with a 120-pound robot, and no, the Secret Service has no sense of humor. By 2011, we moved the World Championship to St. Louis to a 76,000-seat arena where they play the Super Bowl. This is what it looks like in the pits. This is what kids think of science and technology when you let them do it aspirationally, when you don't force them to look at 19th century textbooks. As I said, about a third of the kids are women and minorities. To give you a sense of the growth of FIRST, little South Korea now has 500 teams. Most of you would like to have companies that have this kind of growth. Just so you think I'm not drinking my own Kool-Aid, the Ford Foundation spent $500,000 doing a 4-year longitudinal study of the impact of FIRST and on peer equivalent schools, whether they were rich schools, poor schools, urban schools, rural schools. This is what they found. Any school, when compared to a similar school in the same environment that didn't have a FIRST team, there's a 9 times higher rate of kids getting involved in internships, 4 times more likely to study engineering. Among women and minorities, we multiplied by 4 the outcomes among women, and we doubled the outcomes among minorities. We now have 152 universities that sponsored teams last year. It's up to way more than that this year. Last year, on April 26th, at the championship, we handed out $16 million in scholarships to some of the best universities in the world. The new president, not so new anymore, has been bringing our kids to the White House. They teach him about robots. And I have to tell you, since we need media, we got Will.i.am 2 years ago, right after he did the halftime show for the Super Bowl, to come and do a halftime show at our Super Bowl for all the kids. We're only 22 years old as a sport. How many high school sports do you know that can be interrupted at their championship by the same world-famous entertainers that just did the Super Bowl? Besides getting somebody like him, we also got the voice of God from 4 different movies, Morgan Freeman, to give us a 3-minute video that captures what first is that we could send to all of our potential new sponsors and schools, and I'll show you that video now.